So thank you again for joining SEARAC's March Community Call, Keeping Our Communities Informed. My name is Alyssa Talabat, and I am SEARAC's Training Manager. Today you'll be hearing from my colleagues Katrina Dizon Mariategui, who is SEARAC's Director of National Policy, and Goya Yang, who is SEARAC's Director of California Policy and Programs. We're also joined by our Operations Manager, Kelsey Hendrickson, who will be running tech for us and will be on deck to help with logistical issues. On the topic of logistics, just wanted to give folks a reminder about some housekeeping rules for our community calls. So everyone's line is automatically muted. If you're joining us by phone, just a heads up that you must be logged into the actual webinar if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question for us to unmute your line. Feel free to submit comments and questions throughout the webinar. Kelsey will keep track of them so that we can address them during our Q&A portions. We might also intersperse them during the policy pieces as well. To make a comment or question, you'll want to take a look at the control panel on the left. So you'll see that orange arrow. Under there, you should see a hand icon where you can use to raise your hand. And then there will be a question mark icon for the question section where you can type your comments and questions there and direct them to the webinar organizers. Additionally, in the resources section, you can find some downloadable files that the policy team will touch on during their portions as well. Lastly, as a reminder, we will be recording this webinar and we'll be sharing the recording with everyone. So no need to take any serious notes or anything like that. So everything will be shared after this. So now that we've covered the technical side, we can go ahead and get started. So we always like to kick off these calls getting to know everyone who's on the call. So our first poll for folks is where you are joining us from today. So it'll be East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, South Coast, or other. And we'll give folks a couple minutes. Okay, 5 more seconds or so. All right, let's see what we got.
Oh, the results. Oh, I'm sorry.
So it looks like 2/3 of us are from the West Coast, and then the other third are from the East Coast. So it looks like we'll have to definitely share out for the Midwest and people from the South for the recording. All right. Secondly, we'd like to know if this is y'all's first SEARAC community call or if you're a returning attendee. So our next poll is, how many SEARAC community calls have you attended in the past? So anywhere from 0 or 4 or more. All right, 10 more seconds or so. Great, so let's see what we have. So it looks like half of you, this is your first call, so welcome. Hopefully you come back for more. Looks like the rest is split between 1 or 2 calls you've attended in the past and 4 or more, so we have some veterans. So welcome back and welcome to our new folks. So in terms of what we will be covering today, we're going to start off with an overview of SEARAC's 2018 to 2020 Southeast Asian American National Equity Agenda. From there, we'll touch on what our legislative priorities are with the newfound opportunities in Congress. And we also heard from folks on our last call that they appreciate the policy updates and to keep them coming. So we'll be sharing out on both the national and California front for policy and budget. Lastly, we'll review some updates on SEARAC's work around Census 2020, and then we'll close things out with some audience Q&A. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to our Director of National Policy, Katrina, who's going to get us started.
Thank you, Alyssa. So just a quick recap for folks that have joined this call in the past. We launched our National Southeast Asian American Equity Agenda to highlight our policy priorities from 2018 to 2020 last year. And it focused on the areas of education, health, immigration, and census. At the heart of our advocacy, we understand the importance of disaggregated data to highlight the disparities and opportunities that we see in our communities. This year, SEARAC, with the support of the Wallace H. Coulter Foundation and our partners at Advancing Justice Los Angeles, we will be launching a report on the state of Southeast Asian Americans across the country. You can find a copy of some preliminary findings in the handout section of this webinar, along with 2 new resources that SEARAC has recently launched around data disaggregation. We hope to launch the full report on the state of Southeast Asian Americans nationally in October, and it will cover our policy areas on census, education, health, and immigration. So just a quick recap, as folks know, we had an election last year, and as a result of Southeast Asian American civic engagement, 8 congressional districts serving high population Southeast Asian communities voted against candidates being backed by the Trump administration's party, thanks specifically to voters in California, Texas, and Minnesota. This year, we welcomed the most ethnically and racially diverse Congress in history, including a number of new progressive champions willing to push the envelope and challenge the status quo. With the shift in power in the House of Representatives, we are suddenly seeing new opportunities to support policies that had not been viable in the past. And as a result, now is the time really to be bolder in our advocacy in ways that we have never done before. So next, we're going to go on to do a quick summary of some of our national policy priorities and also looking at the national budget. And kicking things off, we just wanted to do a really brief summary of some threats that we saw coming from the Trump administration this March, and to highlight a few key things that SEARAC has been doing to monitor these attacks and also fight back, and also a few opportunities for those of you on the call who want to be engaged on these issues. So for this month, the White House released their budget, and it reflected the same hate targeted towards immigrants and people of color that the president has spewed since taking office. Not surprisingly, the budget included funding for a border wall, in addition to more Border Patrol and ICE officers to increase the targeting, detention, deportation that have already been escalating in Southeast Asian American communities. We know that in our community, roundups have really escalated in alarming numbers, and there are 14,000 Southeast Asian Americans still living in the country at risk of deportation at any time. However, while the president has asked for huge investments in tearing these families apart through ICE, he's also proposed decreased funding for critical domestic programs serving low-income communities, elders, and students. For example, he recommended cutting the Federal TRIO, a program that helps low-income Southeast Asian students prepare and enroll in college. Eliminating this program would further exacerbate education disparities among Southeast Asian students. The president also wants to eliminate programs such as the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, subsidies on federal student loans, and federal supplemental educational opportunity grants, which would make college even less accessible for low-income students. In the area of health, the president's budget reflected cuts to programs such as food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Critical programs that support many elders, low-income people, and children access the support they need to live and thrive. Without these critical lifelines, the 11% of Lao families, 13% of Vietnamese families, almost 15% of Cambodian families, and 16% of Hmong families living below the poverty line will continue to struggle. Finally, this administration's sorely inadequate request for Census 2020 funding sends a clear message that they are not invested in a truly accurate count of all communities. In response, SEARAC sent a request to appropriators on Capitol Hill to encourage them to fund critical programs that Southeast Asian American communities rely on and cut DHS funding overall. In terms of what you can do in your own communities, we encourage you to amplify these requests, which I will go into in more detail in the next slide, or even consider sending your own requests to your lawmakers. So this is a slide that just quickly summarizes the requests that SEARAC submitted to appropriators. For folks that are interested in copies of our letters, if you're interested in amplifying or using them as resources, feel free to email me at katrina@searac.org and I could share those with you. So as you can see, for immigration, we advocated for no dollars to be appropriated to the detentions, deportations, and to a border wall. For education, we advocated for the maximum allowable funding for institutions that enroll a large proportion of low-income Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Native American students to improve support for underserved populations, or what we refer to as ANAPC programs. Efforts to collect, in addition, we've also advocated for additional funding for efforts to collect and report on disaggregated data to help us continue unmasking education disparities in our communities. And also funding for the Office of English Language Acquisition, or OELA for short, to support limited English proficient students achieve academic success. And for health, we asked for robust funding for programs like REACH, the only community health program funded to address racial and ethnic health disparities. And finally, in the area of census, we reiterated the need for adequate census funding in the amount of $8 billion to ensure that all communities are accurately counted. In addition to this terrible budget proposal, the administration has also been quietly attacking critical poverty alleviation programs through the regulatory process. This past month, 2 proposed rules were released for public comment that would have a devastating impact on many low-income, limited English proficient Southeast Asian American community members. The first proposes to eliminate inability to communicate in English as a factor in assessing supplemental security insurance and Social Security disability insurance eligibility. This has the potential to harm many Southeast Asian Americans who are living in poverty and may be disabled as well. The second proposes to further restrict access to food stamps. Currently, non-disabled adults between ages 18 to 49 who do not have dependent children are limited to only 3 months of food assistance through SNAP in a 36-month period. However, states have the flexibility to limit this impact by applying for waivers in areas with high unemployment. This current proposal by the administration would make it more difficult for states to qualify for these waivers, harming the almost 14% of Southeast Asian American families living in poverty. SEARAC, in terms of what SEARAC has done to mobilize or advocate against these proposals, we did submit comments opposing both regulations. If you would like to weigh in, we encourage folks to consider submitting a comment on these rules using the following links by the Protecting Immigrants Families campaign. The deadline for both rules is by April 2nd. And if folks are interested in seeing a copy of SEARAC's rules for your reference, feel free to request them by emailing me at katrina@searac.org, and I can gladly share those talking points with you. Lastly, making good on its promise to fight for the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, the Trump Department of Justice recently issued a court filing in support of the 5th District's ruling to completely invalidate the Affordable Care Act. In contrast to past efforts by the Trump administration to eliminate certain provisions of the ACA, this move signals a drastically more aggressive approach to end the Obama-era policy completely, a policy that has cut uninsurance rates among the Southeast Asian American community by half. In response, House Democrats plan to introduce legislation to strengthen protections on the Affordable Care Act. In terms of SEARAC's strategy and response, we will continue to monitor this attack on the ACA in order to assess what possible advocacy levers could look like for the Southeast Asian American community. And we encourage everyone to reach out to their lawmakers as early as now to begin expressing why the Affordable Care Act matters to you and your community and why it needs to be protected. With that, we recognize that while fighting against a lot of these bad policies are important, it's also equally critical to be advancing policies that will better serve the lives of our community members. So in this section, we'll be reviewing some new bills introduced in Congress by our new progressive House majority and our champions in the Senate. SEARAC is an organizational sponsor of the Debt-Free College Act, which was reintroduced in the House and Senate this month. This bill would improve college access for many low-income, first-generation Southeast Asian American students who struggle to pay for college by incentivizing states through a one-to-one funding match by the federal government to increase their investments into public higher education to make it more affordable. More than 50% of Southeast Asian students have not attended college for any period of time. This proposal would help lessen this number. The bill would also allow a portion of federal funds to be used for college completion initiatives and for improving institutional capacity while being able to provide student support services. We are grateful for the leadership of Senator Schatz and Representative Pocan for championing this critical bill promoting education equity. With that, we'd like to do a quick poll among folks. So for folks that are willing to share, if you did incur debt to finance college, would you be willing to share how much? Was it less than $15,000, between $15,000 to $30,000, between $30,000 to $45,000, $45,000 to $60,000, or more than $60,000? So we'll give folks a few minutes to fill that out. Thanks so much, everyone. So let's check out the results. So it looks like half of those on the call were less than 50,000, but with a good chunk between the 30 to 45 range. So we're really hoping with this policy, it would help lessen those numbers for many Southeast Asian Americans in the community. So next, is a bill that SEARAC signed on to in support of legislation called Medicare for All, which is a comprehensive bill that aims to guarantee health care for everyone living in the United States, including undocumented immigrants. Southeast Asian Americans continue to deal with the unique physical and mental health challenges resulting from trauma from the U.S.-backed war in Southeast Asia and suffer from a number of health disparities. Yet, many in our communities face barriers to accessing quality, affordable health care. According to the 2017 American Community Survey, almost 7.5% of Southeast Asians were not insured. This is why SEARAC applauds Representative Jayapal for leading the way towards a more equitable healthcare system that would provide a basic human right for all people, including vulnerable immigrant and refugee populations. With that, we'd like to just do another quick poll around your thoughts on Medicare for All, which is basically, a single-payer healthcare system. So, in general, would you be supportive of a Medicare for All type of legislation? So either yes, 100%, yes, but you need more information. Maybe you still need to figure it out to decide, or hesitant. I'm not sure if you really support the idea of single-payer healthcare, or no, you definitely do not support single-payer healthcare. So we'll give folks just a few minutes to fill that out. Great. Thanks so much for participating, everyone. Awesome. Wow, a majority of folks, 90%, say yes, either yes completely or yes, you just want a little more information, and a minority of folks are in the maybe zone. So thank you for sharing that. This is the first time that SEARAC has actually signed on to a bill of this nature, but we're really excited and hope to continue to monitor the situation and engage with folks on the issue. So with that, we'll go on to immigration. So for this month, SEARAC joined our partners at South Asian Americans Leading Together and the National Korean American Service and Education Consortium to welcome the introduction of the DREAM and Promise Act in the House, legislation that would provide deportation relief and a path to citizenship for young immigrants who had qualified for President Obama's Deferred Action for Child Arrivals program and individuals with temporary protected status. The bill would provide a pathway to citizenship for 9,000 undocumented Vietnamese immigrants. And while it is limited in scope of deportation protections, we are hopeful that this is just the first step in creating a foundation for additional policy that would protect all of our Southeast Asian American community members from the fear of deportation. Building on this momentum, the Senate also introduced their own version of the DREAM Act as well just this week. So with that, we wanted to poll folks, and just to give folks a little background on this question. So, currently the DREAM and Promise Act, it does allow for considerations for undocumented people with minor traffic violations to still be eligible for deportation relief. But during a process called markup, lawmakers are able to debate, amend, and rewrite legislation. And we know that anti-immigrant lawmakers will likely pressure our champions in vulnerable districts to exclude those with minor traffic violations from benefiting from the bill. In anticipation of this, we are seeking stories that we can uplift in Congress to make the case that this provision should not be negotiated away. So with that, if folks are willing to share, do you know anyone who is undocumented in the United States and came here before the age of 17 and has a minor traffic violation? So we'll give folks a few seconds to fill that out and summarize the results. Thank you, everyone. Let's check out the results. Okay, so it seems like a number of you know folks in your community, more than half, and then it's split even between no or just needing more information. So thank you so much for sharing that, everybody. We do encourage for those that do know somebody to please consider emailing our immigration policy advocate, at com@SEARAC.org, to share these stories if you're willing. Someone from the SEARAC team could follow up with a phone call. We'd love to amplify these stories with our champions in Congress. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our California Director of Policy and Programs to go over some of their California legislative and budget priorities.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to tune into our community call. We know that this is like high times for everyone, and there's just a lot of things that are moving. So thank you so much for your time. I'm glad to share with you a portion of this year's SEARAC California's budget and policy priorities today. As mentioned earlier, under the Trump administration, we have seen continuous attacks on our communities as it pertains to education, health, immigration, even the census, and more. My hope is to share out SEARAC California's budget and policy priorities as areas for our California listeners to get involved, as well as to inspire any sort of like model legislation in other states. So I will start off with California's budget advocacy. The first is census. So as you all know, census is the only national body of data that disaggregates some of our Southeast Asian American data. We heavily rely on their data to help us tell various Southeast Asian stories and also to be able to advocate for appropriate resources. So for example, education data, health insurance, even poverty rates. And last year, former California Governor Brown and the California State Legislature approved a total of $90.3 million to be allotted to census community outreach and education. This funding provided both county and community-based organizations to really carry out census outreach. So they put out an RFP recently and also have identified some of the grantees already. In January, our new governor, Governor Newsom, included in his proposed budget an additional $54 million for census outreach. What advocates as well as SEARAC are asking for is actually a total of $93.4 million this year for census community education and outreach in the new budget. We're also advocating for California Census Complete Count staff to develop and mandate a language access plan, especially to address the need for smaller language groups, which includes Hmong, Lao, Yumian, and Khmer, as well as for non-written languages. especially, up and down the Central Valley and for our indigenous population in California. In regards to health budget advocacy, in January, California Governor Newsom included in his proposed budget a total of $134 million to expand full scope Medi-Cal for undocumented adults from the age of 19 to 25 years old. SEARAC, along with other advocacy organizations, are in support of this request. However, we do have two specific bills that are running, one in the Senate and one in the Assembly, that would expand full scope Medi-Cal for individuals regardless of their race, age, gender, or immigration status. So it's really similar to the Medicare for All, but I think this also goes beyond what is being proposed at the national level. And then additionally, we also have a budget request of $15 million a year to extend funding for health navigators to ensure that there continues to be culturally and linguistically appropriate staff to support our community members in navigating their healthcare as well as the healthcare system. And then lastly, for the budget advocacy is education. So we have been working really closely with a bunch of other advocacy organizations through the College for All Coalition, where we are advocating for a renewal of a state-funded college readiness block grant. So what this block grant would do, if it is included in the budget and implemented, is that $200 million would go to K-12 public local education agencies to prepare students to be college ready. And then at the same time, $20 million would go to the University of California campuses to enhance their recruitment and retention programs for low-income and foster youth students. For Southeast Asian Americans, we know that only about 50% of our college students actually graduate out with a bachelor's degree. So this particular renewal is very important to us because we want to ensure that our students are being retained and then also graduating from college. And then lastly, for this readiness block grant is also to have the UC system create 2,500 additional enrollment slots that would be specifically for low-income or foster youth students. So moving into our poll question, I did want to ask you, which of these California items or California budget items speak to you? And feel free to check all that applies. So maybe just like 5 more seconds. All right. Wow. Okay. This is awesome. So we have 100% of our attendees who have identified census, community outreach, and education as an area that speaks to you. We definitely want to ensure that your voice is counted in the advocacy, so feel free to reach out to me at any time. We have 90% who is also interested in Health for All, whether it's in the budget or maybe with the different bills that I mentioned. And then also 60% who are interested in sustaining health navigators for our communities, as well as 90% who's interested in the college readiness block grants. I totally forgot to include my email address, but do feel free to reach out to me to get more information or to be updated. My email address is nkaujIab@searac.org. Thank you. And then I'm going to go and move into our policy priorities. I wanted to start off with Assembly Bill 512, which is titled Cultural Competence in Mental Health, and it's authored by Assemblymember Phil Ting. As you may already be familiar, Southeast Asian American community mental health, especially intergenerational war trauma or PTSD, are oftentimes not served or addressed appropriately by county mental health. That's why SEARAC has decided to become a co-sponsor of this bill. The lead sponsor is CPEN, and I'm happy to also put you involved with or in touch with them as well. So what this bill would do is that it would require California counties to report their cultural competency plans and require the California Department of Healthcare Services to annually review and monitor the improvement in mental health disparities reduction. The bill will also require each county cultural competency committee to be staffed with consumers, advocates, providers, and also local disparities reduction experts, which would allow community advocates and clients to really steer how cultural competency mental health should look like county by county in California. And then lastly, the bill would require county mental health to utilize both evidence-based and community-defined practices in their services. I think what we've been seeing, through discussions with community members and community partners is that, the county has not been able to really utilize community-defined practices. So then that doesn't allow them to really, think about how to expand their cultural competency plan. The bill has moved through successfully. It has moved through the Assembly Health Committee unanimously on Tuesday, and then will be heard in Assembly Appropriations in May. This bill matters to our community because it helps counties to expand their mental health services model and really would open the doors to serve our Southeast Asian communities as well as other communities that need appropriate mental health services. And so I'm going to move into my poll and just ask you a really simple question. Do you know someone who is impacted by mental health? So you can say yes, no, or I don't know. So we'll just go ahead and take another 5 seconds. Okay. So wow, we have a total 100% of our attendees who say that someone who's impacted by mental health. And so these county mental health plans, they definitely need to improve so that they could serve the folks that and sometimes it might be ourselves, right? So if you're interested, definitely reach out to me. There's also in the attachment the fact sheet for AB 512. And yeah, feel free to download that and share it with your network. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next two bills. And they're both kind of ethnic studies related bills. The first one is Assembly Bill 331. It is the ethnic studies high school graduation requirement authored by Assembly Member Medina. And so right now, currently, California's Department of Education has convened an Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Committee. Their role is really to design an outline model curriculum that school districts would then be able to pull from and implement at the school district level. So they had a meeting that was open to the public last week, and there's also a meeting that's coming up in April, and I believe that this committee is open to the community providing any sort of public comments throughout the next month. So definitely feel free to ensure and make sure that your voices count by sharing with the Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Committee what you would like to see. So anyways, going back to the bill, this bill would require Ethnic Studies course become a high school graduation requirement for public high schools, which includes charter schools, which would include public charter schools by 2024, 2025. And the ethnic studies course would be offered through an elective course or language arts, English, or social studies. There's flexibilities in terms of what discipline it could be offered through. This bill would be beneficial to the Southeast Asian community because ethnic studies classes really help to increase commitment to school and also build self-determination, as well as teach students and allow them to learn about each other. And it can also combat bullying, especially knowing that Asian Americans have maybe one of the highest rates of being bullied at school. The next bill is Assembly Bill 1393, which is the Laotian Histories and Cultural Studies bill, authored by Assembly Member Weber. This bill will require California's Department of Education's Instructional Quality Commission to develop and submit to the state board model curriculum relative to the history and cultural study of Laotian refugees, which includes, communities like the Lao community, Yu Mien, Camus, Putal, Tailu, Taidam, and Taidang refugees. And the hope is to have this model curriculum completed by December 2025. This bill would be complementary to the movement of what's happening in California regarding ethnic studies, curriculum development, and hopefully ensuring that ethnic studies become a high school graduation requirement. And this model curriculum, we are hoping that, it would be a curriculum that school districts would be able to have access to, especially for those who have a high population of Southeast Asian population. And also to just acknowledge that last year, SB 895, which was authored by Senator Nguyen, also passed, and it's to build a model curriculum for Vietnamese refugees, Cambodian refugee, and also Hmong refugee history and cultural studies. So we're hoping to kind of amp up the curriculum around there. So there are a few additional budget items and policy priorities that I will include in next week's kind of community alert. I didn't want to just spend too much time talking about it today. So we'll have the full package next week for you all to review. But yeah, moving into our last polling question from me is, have you ever taken an ethnic studies or Asian American studies course before? So we'll go ahead and just give it another 5 seconds. All right. Oh, wow. Okay, this warms my heart because I am both an ethnic studies undergrad major and got my master's in ethnic studies. So it's really nice to see that 82% of our attendees have taken an ethnic studies or Asian American studies course. And we have about 18% who has not. Definitely interested and wanting to connect with you more to provide you more information if you're interested around these bills. And that's it from me. I will pass it on over to my colleagues in DC. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you so much, Katrina and Goia, for those thorough and informative updates. Hopefully everyone on the call got a lot of information out of them. It was really encouraging to see folks' response to Goia's poll about census, that 100% of you on the call are interested in learning about community education and outreach. So as many of you probably know, Census 2020 will be critical to ensuring that our Southeast Asian American communities across the country are accurately counted so that we have our fair access and fair share to government resources for things like schools, hospitals, and roads, our fair political representation in Congress, and long-term opportunities for ourselves and our families. Because of this, SEARAC is dedicated to working with you all to make sure we are accurately counted, but we need your help. So as some of you may know, we are about to hit the 1-year mark for Census 2020. So this coming Monday, April 1st, SEARAC, along with many of our partners and allies, will be participating in a day of action to elevate census awareness and education for people across the country. So how you guys can get involved, we're encouraging folks to pledge to participate and be counted. So we have a pledge form that will be sent out in our follow-up email to all webinar attendees and registrants. If folks feel comfortable sharing why Census 2020 matters to you in a hashtag #CountMeIn photo campaign, and then just posting on social media, so there will be a number of Twitter storms. I'm sure there's a number of social media campaigns going on as well for Census. So just getting the word out now that we're officially 1 year out as to why Census 2020 is going to be so impactful for the community. So just to get a sense of how many folks plan on engaging on April 1st, we'd like to know if any of y'all plan to participate. So we'll just give folks a couple seconds to let us know. Okay, couple seconds more, and then we will go ahead and close it. All right, let's see what we have. So, okay, almost half are for sure participating, and then the other half just needs some more information, which is totally understandable. Again, we'll be circulating some ways to get involved in our follow-up email. So next, we would just like to get a sense of if folks, if they're not participating in Census Day, if they pledge to participate and be counted for Census 2020. So just a minute or so. All right, 5 more seconds or so. All right, let's see what we have. Okay, so great. Almost all of you will definitely be participating and be counted in Census 2020, and then just 10% still need more information. So luckily we have a year, so hopefully it'll be 100% by April 2020. All right, so next up is another poll. So as part of the role SEARAC is taking on for Census 2020, we plan to build power to the efforts on the ground to get out the count. So one way we hope to engage community members is to identify folks who would like to be census ambassadors. So ambassadors will be the people who go the extra mile to ensure their community is counted by reaching out, educating community members on why census is important, supporting with translation, things like volunteering at organizations dedicated to getting out the count as well. So we'd just like to hear from folks if anyone is interested in becoming a census ambassador for 2020. And we'll give folks 30 seconds or so. All right, 5 more seconds or so. And then we'll see what we got. So, okay, so half of you need more information, which is totally understandable. We're still fleshing out our plans, so we'll be sure to get in touch with folks who are interested in becoming census ambassadors and being more involved. Almost a third say yes, so that's super awesome. And then about a fifth say no, which is totally fine. We totally understand that some folks don't have capacity to be out canvassing and phone banking, stuff like that. So if we could also get your help indulging us in a little mini listening session for census. So we wanted to know which of the following messages resonates with you or your community the most regarding the importance and urgency of census. So census is critical to my family's future and the next generation. Census participation will ensure my fair share of resources. Census participation is a part of being American. Census participation will ensure my voice is heard, or census participation ensures my political representation. So we'll give folks 20 seconds or more to let us know. All right, 10 more seconds or so. All right, let's see what resonates with folks. Okay, so understandably, a lot of folks picked how census is critical to our family's future and the next generation. That's a little bit tied to the next most popular one, which is about fair share of resources, and then political representation. Okay, great. So we wanted to also get a sense of, I know it must have been hard to just narrow it down to one. So in the next poll, we wanted to see which of those choices resonated the second most to you. And please don't pick the same one you picked the first time. So we'll give folks 30 seconds or so to think that through. All right, maybe 10 seconds or so. Great, let's see what we have. Okay, perfect. So it looks like the second most resonant one was about fair share of resources, and then critical to families' future and the next generation is still pretty up there. And then we have still some folks who say political representation, which is also tied to ensuring your voices are heard. So it's good to know. We'll definitely take that into account as we move forward with our communications and get out the count plan. So thank you so much. This is super helpful information. For further information on Census 2020, we'll be taking a deep dive for our April community call, which will be on Thursday, April 25th. A registration link will be sent to everyone on the call today in a follow-up email, so you can already go ahead and register for that if census is of interest to you. So with that, it brings us to the end of our presentation, so we'll pause here now and open the lineup for Q&A. I know there was a lot of information thrown at you, so if you want to take a minute or two to reflect and see what you still have clarification questions on, go ahead. Just to remind folks of our ground rules, when you share out, please share your name, organization, or affiliation if that applies to you. Respect other points of view, and then if you could just keep your remarks succinct to about 2 minutes or so to help us get through as many questions as possible. If you'd like to make a comment or question in your control panel, you'll just want to click on the raise hand icon, and then we can unmute you to open your line for comment. Or if you just want to type it in the questions box, you can do that, and we will read it out. And folks, just a reminder, if you would like to say your question, you would have to be connected by phone as well as computer. So if you have your hand raised and you're not joining audio by phone, you'll need to type that into the chat box. So we have a question. What is the latest update on the addition of a citizenship question on the 2020 census, and when will we find out what SEARAC is doing, any advocacy around it? So the Supreme Court is making the decision on the citizenship question, and they have to make that decision by the end of June this year, which is aligns with the printing deadline for census. So SEARAC has submitted comments to the Federal Register opposing this change, and just this week we signed onto an amicus brief opposing the citizenship question. That'll be filed by NAPABA, or the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association, and the Asian American Legal Defense Fund. So we'll definitely keep community members updated on progress updates on that, because that'll definitely affect how census rolls out in 2020. All right, we have a question about if the slides are going to be shared. So yes, we can definitely share out the PDF version of the slides, and then the recording as well will be available. All right, so we just have an ask of community members from one of our attendees. So the next California Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Advisory Committee meeting is April 25th through 26th in Sacramento. And we need folks to provide public comment. Only 2 spoke at the second meeting and none at the first one. So that's a great flag. Thank you, Bobby Dalton Roy, who submitted that for folks on the line. So hopefully we can help circulate that out to get more folks the next time. All right, we'll give folks a couple more minutes for questions. All right, we're going to punt it to Carrie Lorraine Ayala. Sorry if I butchered your name. We'll unmute your line and then you can share out. All right, your line should be unmuted, so go ahead. Is Carrie still there to share her question? I believe it says you're self-muted, so you'll have to unmute on your end. All right, we'll see if we can get it to work in a bit. We'll make room for other questions in the meantime. So again, if folks have any questions, go ahead and keep them coming. We have a few minutes left, so definitely want to address anything else from the attendees. Okay, so we have a question. I think Leah touched on this a bit in her presentation piece, but how is the California Assembly Bill 1393 working together with or complementing the bill that advanced last year on Hmong, Vietnamese, and Cambodian model curriculum? How do we make sure our communities are united in our advocacy? So I will punt that to Goia to take on.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. The Assembly Bill 1393 is actually the follow-up for SB 895, because SB 895, because of the way it moved through the legislature, it didn't include the Laotian refugees. And so our hope is that this bill would move through the legislature and pass, and then also get signed by the governor. And then in the implementation process, I think there has to be a conversation about how all the different refugee communities from Laos, how we would be able to build that curriculum in a way that's cohesive and also inclusive.
Great, thanks, Goia. Any more questions before you wrap up? All right. So we ended early, so thank you so much for sticking around. I know we compacted a lot of information into a little under an hour, so just wanted to give a big thank you again for taking the time out of your day to join us. If you would like to join us next month for our April community call about Census 2020, the registration link will be included in the follow-up email like I mentioned, and that'll be on Thursday the 25th. Our emails are listed there if you would like to get in touch with any of us. For Katrina, if you have questions related to our national policy priorities, you can reach out to her. You can reach out to me for census-related questions, and then go Ia for any California policy or budget-related questions. So again, thank you so much. This recording and webinar slides will be shared with you, and then we hope to see you again for a future community call. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.